I don't kowtow to these, these different political groups telling me what I'm going to do. That's not Mike Moyle.
So what does Mike Moyle think about Mike Moyle being graded by groups like the Idaho Freedom Foundation? Well, we asked Mike Moyle. A follow-up and fallout to our story on inaccurate election information. Speaking of election information, we're taking a look at two of Congressman Mike Simpson's latest campaign ads because many of you seem skeptical about their claims. And another question we get from time to time. The Boise Bench. What is that? Why is it called that? And where is that? We've got all that, sprinkled in with a bit of Boise history. We are seeing more fallout from the conservatives calling out Idaho conservatives for not being conservative enough story we did yesterday and over the past week or so. This is all centered on the attack ads we've been seeing lately, accusing lawmakers like Representative Julianne Young from Blackfoot as wanting kids to have access to porn, despite being the original sponsor of the bill to punish librarians for kids getting their hands on questionable material. They also labeled the Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle, as anti-gun, despite him having been given a Defending Freedom Award from the NRA. Well, those ads can be traced to Young Americans for Liberty, a libertarian student organization that is trying to spread its message across college campuses. But they've also have something they call the Hazlitt Coalition. This is YAL's Liberty Legislator Confederation, 300-plus lawmakers from almost 40 states who pledged to pass liberty bills, promoting free markets and protecting civil liberties. These pictures appear to be from 2022, when they were in Florida to learn how to, quote, craft the strongest policies that solve society's most pressing problems. 17 comrades of this coalition come from Idaho. There, in the front row, are members of Idaho's Freedom Caucus, Senator Tammy Nichols sitting shoulder to shoulder with Representatives Heather Scott and Elaine Price, next to former Representative Carrie Hanks. A few more Freedom Caucus members, Representatives Jason Gallagher and Joe Alfieri, and then on the end, Senator Glenetta Zeiderveld. In the middle of the pack, you'll find Senator Scott Herndon standing behind Representative Dale Hawkins. And there's Representative Josh Tanner standing next to Senator Ben Tays. Well, this Liberty Legislator group just lost a few members. That's because today those Gem State lawmakers took issue with Young Americans for Liberty, pitting Idaho GOP lawmakers against each other over flat-out lies. 16 of them withdrew themselves from the Hazlitt Coalition. Effective immediately, they said. Please remove our names from your website and any future published lists, which they haven't done because, well, their names are still on that website. While many of our values align with the stated purpose of your organization, we diverge on some important topics. Most notably, they said, the legalization of marijuana. They call that incompatible with the conservative principles we hold here in Idaho. So I guess aligning yourselves with libertarians may not be such a good idea. At this point, we've lost confidence in your organization for a few important reasons, they went on. Number one, well, there's that pot thing. And number two, recent attack ad campaigns from your PAC include misleading and deceptive claims, which at times are completely inaccurate. And when they brought these concerns to the organization's leaders, YAL's response has been, quote, disappointing with a centralized, we know better approach. Well, they've seen their allies attacked, and oh, by the way, they haven't seen the support for those who are liberty-oriented. No money or as much as they thought coming into Idaho. YAL's grassroots win at the door campaign has been all but non-existent in Idaho. So this is what happened in 2022, and they are seeing the same failed promises this election cycle, they say. So the Gem State 16 have no other option than to disassociate from YAL's Hazlitt Coalition. At this point, they said, we as Liberty legislators are unsure of your agenda and believe that creating this chaos and confusion for conservative voters is unproductive and damaging. We wish you the best, though. It's signed by Idaho's lawmakers from A to Z, Alfieri to Zeiderveld. Senator Dan Foreman, by the way, who is listed as a member of the Hazlitt Coalition on their website, his name was not on that letter. We did reach out to see if that was a mistake for Senator Foreman or if it was intentional. We have not yet heard back. We also reached out to a couple of other names on that list, like Representative Josh Tanner from Eagle, Senator Carl Bierke from Coeur d'Alene. Still no response. So what does Young Americans for Liberty have to say about this departure? I'm sure that response might be coming as well. We don't know. But what we do know is this group was a bone of contention between Representative Heather Scott and the state director of the Freedom Caucus Network, that'd be Maria Nate, during their State House meeting last session that was secretly recorded, with Nate saying YAL will pull its funding if Representative Scott showed support for Speaker Mike Moyle, and Scott saying they kind of dropped the ball last time, so who cares? What does this all mean in the grand scheme of things? Not sure yet, but to borrow a phrase from Investigate West Daniel Walters from the story we did on this yesterday, the fringe phrase. Well, the Chewy center of that recorded conversation was, in fact, Representative and Idaho Freedom Caucus co-chair Heather Scott's supposed support of House Speaker Mike Moyle, and how that would go against the Freedom Caucus cause. We connected those dots yesterday as well, like how Maria Nate is the secretary of the Idaho Republican Party. She was also a delegate to the Republican National Convention in 2020, but she's also married to a former representative and current president of the Idaho Freedom Foundation. That would be former lawmaker Ron Nate. So there's a lot of crossover on this string theory board going all different directions, but there is a pin punched into the Idaho Freedom Foundation for sure, which leads us to Deborah in Boise sending us this message yesterday. Sure wish Speaker Moyle would speak out against in-state Idaho Freedom Foundation like Senator Winder has. Could the 2-8 explain to him that it's out-of-state libertarians, not liberals, coming after him? She sent that with a loud effect, by the way, so which, if you have a phone, you know what that means. Anyway, libertarians versus liberals. We explained that yesterday, both in the story and at the end of the show. But the speaking out against the IFF, well, Speaker Moyle actually did that yesterday as well. We just didn't have time to include it in Monday's story. When Andrew Bartline asked him about the IFF being influenced by scorecards and pointed out his Freedom Index score is not great, like 59%, which is an F, Speaker Moyle said this.
Yeah, but I think they've weaponized it. And I'll give you an example. The bill to go after fentanyl drug dealers was negative. A bill to go after porn for our children was a negative like 8. Why would Freedom Foundation want our children to have porn on their phones? Why would the Freedom Foundation want fentanyl dealers not to be punished? I mean, these guys have lost their way. I don't think that's what Idahoans want, right? And so you've seen the Freedom Foundation kind of morph to this place. I don't, especially the last 2 years, and I don't know why they're going there, right? Because I assure you, in my district, they don't want fentanyl. They don't want drug trafficking. They don't want prostitution. They don't want human trafficking, and they've kind of gone that way. And so, you know, but that's between them and whatever.
Well, we didn't reach out to the IFF because they have a policy of not speaking to the media. It's on their website. Also on their website is the rating system, how they kind of judge these bills by Parrish Miller, who is their rating expert, apparently. And it's based on 12 questions that basically ask if the bill creates penalties for victimless crimes, or if it raises taxes, or if it expands government in any way. Those things will get that bill a negative rating. So there you go. Deborah, Speaker Mike Moyle has joined Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder in speaking out against the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Okay, so speaking of speaking out, Mike Simpson has held the Eastern Idaho congressional seat since 1999. And we've gotten this question a couple of times as well. Can you objectively fact check that'd be Congressman Mike Simpson's recent ad about President Biden, invasion, borders, etc.? Simpson has misled the voter before. Well, Simpson did pump out a pair of ads this election cycle in an effort to hold off Republican challenger Scott Cleveland. You might know Simpson. He's been on our show a few times, best probably for his push on immigration reform to support Idaho agriculture. But heading into this primary, he's kind of turned over a new leaf. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Congressman Mike Simpson starts hot down south, making his bid as a man of law and order.
Joe Biden is deliberately turning every state into a border state. Increased gang activity, human trafficking, skyrocketing fentanyl, seizures, overdoses, and deaths.
It's a lot to bite off, so we'll take them one at a time. Politicians claim a rise in gang activity often because it can't be proven on a nationwide scale. The National Youth Gang Survey tracked these numbers from 1996 to 2012, when the Department of Justice cut funding. Human trafficking is inherently in the shadows, but the Bureau of Justice Statistics shows from 2011 to 2021, the number of people prosecuted in the United States doubled. The trend goes back far beyond Biden's presidency. Moreover, human trafficking quadrupled worldwide over a similar time span. Under Biden's presidency, fentanyl and synthetic drugs are spiking. But this trend, too, predates his administration. CDC statistics show fentanyl deaths even picked up steam under the Trump years, which makes the next part a head-scratcher.
To stop it, Mike Simpson knows Donald Trump must defeat Joe Biden. Then Mike will help Trump end Biden's open-door policy.
And the alleged impacts are realized in part 2.
Joe Biden's broken border. To Biden, it means 10 million new Democrat voters.
That number made rounds on social media, but its origins trace back to the Pew Research Center. Last year, Pew estimated 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants lived in the United States. But that's counting people who've been here for decades, not just people entering under Biden's term. But it sets up Simpson for his big punch.
It means now more than ever we must secure the border and secure our elections by requiring real photo IDs to vote.
And if you follow Idaho politics, you'd know that's already the law in the Gem State. And it was strengthened in 2023 by House Bill 124. It bans student IDs at the polls.
Mike believes if you need a photo ID to adopt a pet or catch a plane, then it's appropriate to require a photo ID to protect our constitutional right against illegal votes.
And that's something the congressman will have to take up outside the Gem State. 14 states, including Oregon and California, do not require any documents to vote, but the state does match signatures as a form of verification. Nationwide, nearly 2/3 of Americans do show an ID to vote.
I'm Mike Simpson, and I approve this message.
Like most election ads, there's interpretation, kernels of truth, and sometimes claims that are a matter of opinion. In this case, Simpson is calling on a secure southern border, which he says will pay dividends to these adjacent problems, including drugs, crime, and election security, even endorsing Donald Trump in the process, which is interesting because we've seen him flip-flop on that before as well.
Yes.
I think before 2016, he said he was unfit to be president.
Right before he said he was unfit to be president, and then he backed him. But we've seen this combination before with Simpson in Congress, Trump in the White House. What's going to be different this time around?
That's a question you need to ask him.
All right, hopefully we can do that. All right, thanks, Andrew. Two symbols of summer, splash pads and chip sealing. Both are featured in today's 411 with Abby Davis.
Manner of death in this case was homicide.
We learned more about Tammy Daybell's death in day 23 of Chad Daybell's triple murder trial. He's the Eastern Idaho man accused of murder and conspiracy in the deaths of his late wife Tammy and his current wife's two children, JJ and Tylee. Utah's Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Lily Marsden, and other forensic pathologists determined Tammy was killed. They ruled out causes of death like cardiac arrhythmia and seizures, leaving them with asphyxia. Tammy had newer bruises on her chest and arms, which Dr. Marsden testified are consistent with someone being restrained.
You were asked about the bruises and indicated it could indicate there was more than one person there. Is that fair? Yeah.
Court is back tomorrow. A quick traffic alert, crews started chip sealing Glenwood Street last night. The Idaho Transportation Department says it will be on Glenwood between State Street and Chinden Boulevard. Some lanes will be closed overnight through Friday from 9 p.m. until 6 a.m. The city of Nampa said a new splash pad is coming to Midway Park next Wednesday. They're also adding an outdoor gym, more parking, a practice field, and a court for basketball and futsal. You can cool off at the splash pad from 10 a.m. until 9 p.m. starting the 22nd. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
Been a busy day of viewer questions today, so let's just go ahead and call it, how about Talk Back Tuesday? All right, here we go. We've had this question before. Tyler, though, he wants to know, what is considered the Boise Bench? Like, what roads to what roads? He was born and raised here, and he lives off of Broadway, but Tyler's working on a project for the bench, and he just wants to make sure he gets it right. Well, it seems like, well, Tyler answered kind of his own question when he posted this Google map of the bench on his Facebook post, adding, all right, we got the info we needed, which is actually generating a lot of conversation on Facebook, including from Aaron Bryant, who came up with this map, adding the bench and the upper bench, which started even more opinions from bench dwellers and beyond. Like, there's an upper bench? What is this all about? Sylvia said upper bench in South Boise and lower elevation, that's comical. Ashley, who thinks the depot bench, there's the airport bench, but no such thing as the upper bench. What are we doing here? Well, okay, so we're going to set the record straight by going all the way back to the beginning of Boise's bench. Okay, the Boise Bench. Where is it? Well, first, let's look at the layout of the valley carved out by the Boise River well before it even had a name. Tens of thousands of years of mountain snow melting and water running downhill unchecked created the levels we know today. There's the lower level, basically the river and all of downtown Boise westward. Then the next level, well, that would be the bench.
West from Federal Way, north from the Boise Airport, and east from Cole Road.
Literally, like a bench, a place for your feet and a place for your seat.
So that's geographically what the Boise Bench has historically been considered, and even what residents as early as 1900 would have considered the Boise Bench.
As for how the bench should be considered historically,
it's the next chapter outside of that first 5 years of downtown core development.
That first chapter began months after Idaho became a territory.
In fact, Boise City was platted and established on July 7th, 1863.
So a city was started, and getting in and out of it, well, those days, that meant trains.
But before you can have railroad, you have to have water.
Thus, the next chapter, which developed by diverting water south from the Boise River with the Reidenbach Canal in 1865. While all that was happening, in 1871, a man named William Morris moved to town.
And again, we don't know a lot about William Morris, but we do know that he was involved with a number of organizations, a number of businesses.
One of those as a manager of the Northwest Stage Lines. However, his duties, and apparently his disposition, were often disagreeable, as noted by a historian from the 1890s.
An antique specimen of human nature, encased in a body which was just a trifle larger than his soul and conscience. He was a mass of prejudices and sinuous vindictiveness. The reason I mention him, although he deserves to be forgotten, is that his character should go on record for what it was. And, in addition, the names of the decent men connected with that corporation should be made more brilliant by comparison with him.
Okay, so as a person, he may deserve to be forgotten, but as a property owner, not so much. The man with a mass of prejudices managed to amass a lot of land.
And he was kind of the founder of the Boise Bench because he took action to acquire more than 17,000 acres of land south of town on the bench through the Desert Land Act.
Which made more acreage available for a lot less money. Then Morris was also able to get a lot of farmers and businessmen to help finish the Reidenbach Canal.
By 1891, there's more than 100 miles of ditch, 153 laterals within this Reidenbach system, and it irrigates 22,000 acres of land on the bench.
A flood irrigation system that allowed for the blossoming of orchards, like apples, plums, and peaches. And it's a system that is still in place today, and why the bench became one of Boise's first suburbs.
You cannot talk about the history of the city of Boise without acknowledging that the Boise Bench is woven into that fabric.
Okay, so now you know where the Boise Bench is and how you can find it. And I can anticipate your questions now. Again, how far west does it go? Well, I guess that would go to the city limits. That makes it the Boise Bench. Does Eagle have a bench? No, that becomes Meridian. Does Meridian have a bench? No, I believe that becomes Cuna. So that's how it all lays out, right? Hopefully we answered your questions.
The pleasant stretch of weather that we're currently in is expected to continue. So really nice view from Nampa. You can see the golf course in the distance here. 75 degrees, probably a really nice day to be out there. Also in other Treasure Valley spots like Boise, you can see lots of blue sky, little hint of green on some of the foothill areas. So just a really nice, exceptionally warm late spring day. Those high temperatures have been close to 80 degrees in the Treasure Valley spots. Ontario a little bit warmer than that, 60s, close to 70 over in Haley, and lower 70s over in the Magic Valley areas. And so for some spots, today is a bit warmer than yesterday. Others, like Boise, it's a little bit cooler. It's a little bit of a mix compared to yesterday, but we will expect to see these comfortable temperatures stick around, as well as the ample sunshine. Also, we're expecting some dry conditions to persist over the next 5 days or so. We're tracking a little bit of some chances of shower activity on Sunday and maybe perhaps Saturday, but Sunday looks to be the highest chance thus far, but even that chance is looking to be on the low side. And I mentioned those temperatures, those will be sticking around at being exceptionally warm. The low pressure center bringing some of the showery activity to the eastern parts of the state will move to the east. High pressure ridge expected to build in on Thursday, so we'll see our temperatures peak on Thursday, and then we see those cooler air masses move their way on in. Overall, though, things will be looking exceptionally pleasant all the way throughout your 7-day forecast.
All right, we got your comments for today. Rod in Boise thinks the IFF hasn't morphed at all, as Speaker Moyle said. They've always been extremists, and Moyle and these other Republicans knew that. They knew that then, but they didn't care. Now that the IFF is attacking them, they care. They created this. Well, Speaker Moyle right in the sense the last couple of years, maybe even a bit longer than that, though. Their tone and their tactics have certainly changed from what they started out as a think tank. That's how they started. Conservatives eating each other in order to protect freedom, liberty, and heritage are just as humorous as Congressman Mike Simpson not caring that misleading or false information ads are the same as lying, says David in Boise County. Again, this is for white heterosexual Christians. If Mike Simpson has been in office since 1999, why is he waiting until now to think about securing the southern border? Seems like he has difficulty getting stuff done. Maybe it's time to elect somebody new, says Sue. To that, this is what this viewer says. Well, Simpson's so worried about the border, he should not have voted against the border bill that came up a few months ago, which a lot of them did. Has an Idaho Democrat ever said or done anything that warranted your criticism, snide remark, or fact-checking? I've only been watching for 4 years, so I may have just missed it. Well, there's only about 12, 19. We're keeping our eyes out for it, though. We'll let you know.